Joe Terranova, I'm going to turn to you. You're calling this mixed picture we're seeing right now kind of an unfamiliar market. Why do you say so?
All right, here we are. I have a 10-year at 4.54. What should have happened coming into Monday? After the news that we got over the weekend, bond yields spiked, bond yields are staying higher. This is the best that the bears can do. The market is basically pausing. It's basically consolidating. I'm not really sure what people are afraid of. I think what we are really trying to identify is that 2025 is a different market, and it's an unfamiliar market to investors over the last several years. I say that because if you study the 52-week highs, if you look at momentum, and by the way, momentum is a leading factor year to date. Generally, when momentum is a leading factor, markets don't go lower. Momentum being a leading factor is indicative of a confident, good market. But the momentum names are not the names that you think of. They're not the 2021 names with astronomical PEs and do-it-yourself type of names. They're not the names of 23 and 24 related to AI, software, and semis. They're industrials, they're financials, they're healthcares. You have, finally, dispersion in terms of performance. I was looking at my holdings this week in Joe T and personally. In Joe T, we have 16 names that are making 52-week highs this week. Frank, not one of those names is a technology name.
No Mag 7.
No Mag 7. All right, so you have Netflix.
You're keeping us in suspense. Here's some of the components right here. Axon, Monster, Train, Insulet, Republic Services. Give us a sense. Is there a common theme when we're talking about these names?
The common theme is that the last 2 years you had narrow, concentrated revenue growth. And it was all about AI. It was all about technology. So let's pick one of the names. Monday, Bank of New York makes a new 52-week high. Bank of New York is giving you double-digit revenue and earnings growth. Think about that. A regional bank, a super regional, giving you that type of growth. So the point on all of this is not a bad market. This is not a market to be afraid of. This is a market that is just rewarding investors in different places. How about utilities? Utilities are up 9% so far year to date when you have bond yields ticking higher. Look overseas. Germany making a new all-time high. Europe very strong. So the unfamiliar places of the last several years is what is leading the market higher. They're becoming the momentum names, and that's indicative of a confident environment.
All right, so I want to bounce a few things. You're saying it's not a bad market. You're saying it's a healthy market, just a bit of a change of leadership. Piper Sandler said something very similar. They called it a healthy pause. They said the upward momentum, your word, is slowing the S&P 500 is near 6,000, but a healthy pause seems more likely than a significant pullback. I want to kick this around to everybody else. Let's show Joe's stocks one more time. We're showing the statement here from Piper first, but some of these names, are you guys seeing any theme? One thing that kind of popped up in my mind is some protection from tariffs. You're talking Axon. They produce mostly in Arizona. Train Technologies had Dave Regnery on my show, Worldwide Exchange. They produce most of what they sell here in the U.S. Beverages are made here, obviously. Republic Services, they're picking up trash here in the U.S. Are you guys seeing anything else when it comes to these names?
Well, if you look at some of the names, again, that are hitting new highs, Schwab, for example, so financial services brokers, where I don't think they've come up with a tariff on brokerage services yet when you're trading on your phone. But, you know,
let's hope not.
Who knows?
Let's hope not.
But most of them are at all-time highs or close to it. Waste Connection, that's a name that we own all-time. Again, it's local. They're not putting a tariff on your local municipality's garbage, service. So you can go through a list and see that there is a theme. However, the market, remember, started the year at about this level. We're right where we were. We had a drop of 20% overall. I'm talking about the S&P 500. We've started the year at a certain level, 30 times for the Mag 7. Can we pull up the little chart, Annie? Let's pull up that chart on multiples so far this year. You started the year with multiples on the Mag 7 formula at 30 times, went to 22.8 times. Now we're back to 27, almost 28 times, meaning that the overall market, and these are still a big component, despite what's going on underneath, is sort of rotating around. Started at a level, fell 20%, has come back. So you've got two tails of two markets. One where underneath there's a lot of names where you can make money on hitting all-time high, tariff-related, sustainable growth-related, and then you've got these big big names, the mag names and some of the other huge components in the S&P that are sort of doing this, revolution, somersaulting over each other, now kind of back closer to where they were.
But that's a better market because you could generate alpha in that environment.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about the Mag 7 outperforming, and now you got to chase beta.
Right. To your point, valuations obviously lower than they were to start the year. They dipped. The second one you showed was about 22. That was the April 8th lows. And so we had a lot of uncertainty. We've gotten, I guess, a bit more certainty now. The other thing, Carrie, you're doing my job. I'm supposed to call for the full screens. Annie. Let's pull up Joe T's holdings when we're talking about some of these momentum names. Brent, we don't want to leave you out this conversation right now. What do you make of Joe T's list? These are components in the Joe T ETF hitting 52-week highs. Any of these names that you like right now that you see as a potential buy, or maybe some names you don't like?
Well, no, I think Joe makes a great point that you're having this broadening out across multiple sectors. If you look, Train and Monster have nothing to do with each other. And so I think that you do have this broadening out. At the same time, though, where are you getting the best margin and earnings growth? You're still getting them from the Mag 7. And so I think, this narrative that these companies are left for dead, the U.S. is not exceptional, I just think that was, garbage. And that you continue to see, I think, these big companies are really inexpensive. Not all of them, but most of them are very inexpensive relative to their growth rate and also, their margins. I think at the S&P level, though, to punch through around 6150, around the highs where we started the year, you're going to need a catalyst. And I think just because we have this unknown tariff overhang that isn't remotely resolved, by the way, not even remotely resolved, I think to punch through or go much higher seems not to be something that's going to happen, I think, until later this summer, until we get past that 90 days or get more clarity, coupled with, what's going to happen in Congress with the big, beautiful bill. And I think that's where yields come into play. And I think that the probability of the tax bill approving is very correlated with bond yields going higher. And so, Joe mentioned the 10-year, the market not really doing anything with that. I think we definitely need to continue that, because if the Fed doesn't cut rates, then we are going to have really big interest on the debt, which is going to eat more and more into GDP. And so I think there's reasons why we're at the higher end of the range for the S&P, and we're going to rest for a bit until we get more clarity on yields, taxes, and tariffs.
I don't disagree with any of that. Look, I think we're going to make a run at the all-time highs, and what happens from there, I think it's up in the air. I think it potentially could be a trap when you're just basically allocating to the market. But there's more than just the names that we're showing there in the last several days that have made 52-week highs. How about Uber making a 52-week high? TJX, Visa, MasterCard in the insurance industry, Travelers, Hartford. How about ADP? ADP making a 52-week high, Howmet making a 52-week high. So I think, again, if you're looking at the market, yeah, I agree with everything that Bryn is saying, and I agree with you in terms of valuation itself. There's challenges ahead, but that's not what you're supposed to be doing, just buying the index. You're supposed to be looking for alpha opportunities in individual names, and the momentum factor is telling you right now that there are a variety of different names, and they have reasonable valuations as well. It's not as if it's an astronomical PE.
Yeah, to your point, two things. Here at CNBC, we track momentum with the MTUM ETF.
What do you do
about 20% over the last month. This guy, comedian. Also, bond yields obviously a big part of the story. So the tax bill you just mentioned, it has the potential to raise those bond yields. So we'll have to continue to watch that. One thing we want to talk about also is Tesla. Our David Faber, he did an outstanding interview with CEO Elon Musk yesterday, sitting down, wide-ranging on a number of topics. One of them, of course, was self-driving and the outlook for self-driving for Tesla. Just take a listen.
My prediction is that probably by the end of next year, we'll have probably hundreds of thousands, if not
hundreds of thousands,
if not over 1 million Teslas doing self-driving in the U.S.
And just to clarify, because we can't play the whole interview once again, that includes people who own Teslas and also robo-taxis. Bryn, you're kind of our resident Tesla expert here. What did you make of that interview and the idea there might be 1 million Teslas out on the road doing full self-driving?
Right. Well, right now it's supervised. I have a Tesla. I can drive it. My house to the airport, never touch it until I'm going to valet. 2 years ago, it drove like a 16-year-old learning how to drive for the first time, very herky-jerky. Now it's so smooth, it's so intuitive. I know David talked about some report that said it ran through a red light. I drive it all the time. It's been exceptional. And I think that all of a sudden, when we as Tesla car owners can just rely on that is, and pay $99 a month, people are going to all flip that switch and pay the $99 a month. And then where the second half of the interview really came when Elon came back is with Optimus. And so between autonomy and Optimus, which Tesla is going to build on that manufacturing plant already in existence, and then use them on their own plant at their own gigafactories to begin with, is a whole new vertical. And so I feel like in the next few years, people are really going to understand this is not just a car company. They're doing so many other things. And I said yesterday on Closing Bell, it is underestimated the manufacturing expertise of Elon and team and what they're able to do from a manufacturing efficiency. It's just like never been seen before. And so I think people will continue to buy the dip. I do think the stock around 380 to 400 has a top there, and so you can sell calls. But I think this would continue to be a stock that investors will and should buy the dip.
All right, two things. I want to correct myself. Supervised self-driving is what he was talking about, not full self-driving, where you can just go in the back seat and take a nap or anything like that. But our David Faber, you actually brought up a really great point. Currently, BYD, that supervised self-driving, it's included in the price of the car where Tesla's planning a subscription. Now, of course, Chinese EVs aren't sold here in the U.S., but what about the global business? How big of a threat is a BYD or other competitors not asking for a subscription, but including it in the original price tag to this business model and this idea when we're talking about Tesla?
I don't think it's an issue globally, but the country that matters the most for Tesla is China. That's where you're seeing, they probably hit peak oil a few years ago. I mean, they have EVs all over the place. And so I think that, it seems like Elon has a very good relationship with the Chinese government of having somewhat of a fair playing field. And they talked about it yesterday. They need to execute in China and be able to have that full self-driving to be able to, I think, have broad mass adoption. So we'll see. I think that they'll get there. But BYD in China is 100% a massive competitor.
I think what was accomplished yesterday in that excellent interview with David was Elon Musk was able to successfully alleviate, maybe temporarily, some of the fears that you have. First of all, I mean, obviously, next 5 years, CEO. But beyond that, to Bryn's point, you began to question over the last several months, is this a car company or is this a car company with really good technology? So kind of a little bit of a hybrid of the two. I think yesterday we stepped more towards, okay, this is a technology company. But I also thought the words where he said, we will be extremely paranoid about deployment, I actually think that's comforting to shareholders. I think it's comforting that they're taking a very conservative approach and that they're going to supervise the rides and that, in fact, they're not going to go places that they're not familiar with in Austin. I think that's the right approach, and I think as a shareholder, that kind of made you feel good about the strategy.
It made you feel good, but what about the other side of the coin where Waymo seems to be well ahead of them, doing about 5 million autonomous rides just in the last 5 months? This cautious approach by Elon Musk, it might be prudent, but are you worried that they're going to get behind when it comes to this autonomous driving race?
I mean, that's a next level of thinking about your ownership of the equity that's not wrong, but I don't think in the near term it really affects the price as much as the words we heard yesterday, which were comforting, were able to positively affect price. You're not wrong in what you're suggesting, but that's something that evolves, I think, further down the line. I think he was able to really reverse or steady some of the concerns that the marketplace had.
Terry, I want to ask you, do you agree with Bryn's thesis that China is actually the most important market? They get about 20% of revenues out of China, and they're facing a lot of competition there from BYD and other EV makers who, again, seem to be folding this autonomous driving service into the product price, not asking for a subscription. And let's also keep in mind the Chinese economy is not in great shape by any means.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I would say that Tesla is a complicated story, and there are times, for example, the last month, where investors gravitate toward all of the good news and excitement and technology, and the stock is up, I think, 55% from April 8th. And then there are times when investors are going to worry, and they'll just focus on what could go wrong and what's happening in China and who's the competitor and who else is competing with them on the autonomous side. So, you can have these wild swings. It's a very expensive stock on a multiple basis, and therefore it's going to be subject to swings. This recent market, and highlighted in part by what he said to David Faber about the future and the concepts, which are kind of mind-blowing. It's just another example of how dominant and how important these companies are, such as Nvidia or Google. I mean, look, just quickly, look at Google today. Everybody was saying, they're going to lose out on search. They're losing. Let's take those numbers way down. The stock got hit very hard. And do you think they've been sitting around doing nothing related to AI? Of course not. They've been waiting to introduce something, which they're doing.
To your point, Alphabet shares up almost 5% right now. Very quickly, we want to move on, but you were mentioning how expensive the Tesla is. I'm looking at it right now, trading at about 163 times forward earnings. Just really quick around the horn. Joe, is what you heard yesterday, does it justify a valuation of 163 times forward earnings?
Frank, valuation.
That was an Joe. You started with an
I mean, but valuation is something that generally I don't believe is really an accurate predictor of where the future price action is going to go. There's a multitude of examples of stocks that have single-digit valuations and have gone nowhere for years, and then there's triple-digit valuations where you see very strong price appreciation. So
is this the former or the latter?
Obviously, everything that we do is anchored in studying momentum. So as long as something presents itself as having the momentum and gives us the revenue growth along with it, then we're comfortable with that.
Bren, Kerry brought it up, but I saw you nodding your head a bit. 163 times forward earnings, is that justified based on what you heard yesterday?
Oh, PEs you just can't ignore a PE. Go with what Joe just said. It's arbitrary, right? It's completely arbitrary. It's like never going to make you money looking at a PE, whether it's 2 or 2,000. There's Roblox doesn't even have an E, right? And so how do you put a price on 1 million robots 5 years from now? And so, I mean, the robots are coming. Jensen has said multiple times, this is a multi-trillion. Like a trillion's a very big number. And there's many companies that are making them. But if you think about it, as a publicly traded company, they already have the manufacturing to build the robots. They're putting them on their floor. That is a whole new vertical, which today is zero revenue. And I think the market is sniffing that out and doing math around the potential growth of just Optimus over the next 3 to 5 years. And that's where like an Amazon used to have a 1,000 PE, and now it has what, a 30? So ignore PEs.
Okay. Kerry, you brought it up. Just a yes or a no, because we got to move on. You're the one that brought it up, so you can't say it's nothing.
I didn't say it was nothing.
No.
I think it matters less in the case of Tesla. How's that?
All right. We're going to move on. Elon Musk also talking about where Tesla will buy chips from, naming 2 very notable chip companies, Nvidia and AMD. Take a listen.
We expect to still buy a lot of GPUs from Nvidia, some from AMD, and maybe from others. And as long as Nvidia is better than what we make, we'll keep buying from Nvidia.
Is that the case right now?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And what timing? Nvidia earnings coming up next week. Joe, I'm going to come back over to you. Hearing that from Elon Musk after what we saw over in the Middle East, after we're hearing from the hyperscalers maintaining their CapEx investments, I mean, a lot of bullish signs when it comes to this stock. Are there any, potholes, landmines, whatever you want to talk about in this next road ahead for Nvidia?
I mean, it seems as though there's very strong, consistent demand. And yes, we heard that yesterday with XAI, and we heard that in the Middle East, 18,000 chips being bought, Abu Dhabi data centers. And I also think the disposition of Jensen Huang has not changed at all while we've gone through this tariff challenge.
Well, he's got a suit on now, not a leather jacket.
But
one day.
He seems to continue to have a very confident outlook on his business, and not only on the business, but the ability of the business to deliver and meet the demand. It seems as though a lot of people had concerns surrounding would he be able to give enough supply to meet the demand, and it just seems as though he exudes the confidence, and as a shareholder that has to make you feel well. So in the near term, the momentum has clearly turned towards the upside. I think the January all-time high is somewhere around 153. I wouldn't be surprised to see the stock make a move towards there. we'll see what happens with next week's earnings.
Bryn, your take on Nvidia, also very important to note, Jet Swong's been very vocal about export controls, especially to China. I believe he said a few years ago, Nvidia was about 95% of the China AI chip business. Now it's just 50%, worried about the U.S. being involved in that AI build-out. Is China a concern center when it comes to Nvidia in any way similar to Tesla?
Well, it's similar to Tesla that both Elon and Jensen have been able to thread, I think, a really small needle hole between working with the CCP in China and Trump. And so kudos to both of them. China is incredibly important to their revenues. And so I think that we had this like existential threat if the tariffs, which, Besant probably said were embargo type tariffs, doesn't make any sense. And so I think we'll wait and see. And I do think that what happens with the export controls, are very, very important to Nvidia in the short and long term. We're not going to have to worry about that this quarter. They're going to be great numbers. This continues to be, I think a cheap stock. If you look at like a PEG ratio, which is the PE growth rate, the PE versus the growth rate, very cheap name. But China I think, continues to be existential for this company, especially if Trump goes back and puts some type of real ban on those chips.
Hello everybody, welcome to my channel, Blue Cloud Trading. It is Wednesday, May 21st. It's actually 4:45 p.m. after the close. So we're going to take a look at the markets. One of the things we're going to talk about is Tesla today. In fact, the video inspired me to actually put a post about 42 minutes ago on my YouTube channel. It's under posts here. One of the things I did essentially was I went to Grok 3. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. That happens to be Elon Musk's artificial intelligence software. I asked its AI to give me a summary, basically, a summary of Elon Musk's tendency to over-embellish Tesla's achievements. And it gave me a very interesting response, which I'm going to kind of go over. I'm going to summarize a little bit of that in a few seconds. What else are we going to talk about? I think you're going to get a kick out of that. Unless you're a huge Tesla, fan and a huge Elon Musk fan, you might not like what you're about to hear. Okay, but so let's take a look at this. FinViz Elite. We're going to look at how the markets are performing. By the way, Tesla was looking good during the video. It was earlier in the day. Right now, it's down. All of the indices were down today. You can see that Dow was down 1.91%, NASDAQ was down 1.41%, S&P 500 down 1.61%, and the Russell 2000 was down 2.81%. If we look at the heat map here, what you'll notice is that there was just one shining star here, and that happened to be Google. Right there, 2.79. In a sea of red here, Google was one of the few companies that was up more than, I guess, 2%. Looks like CME was up too. All right, CME Group was up 1.39%. CBOE was up 0.96%. Here's a little one right there. CF Industries Holdings under basic materials, that was up. And some of the consumer defensives like Coca-Cola just up a little bit. Same thing with Philip Morris and the Monster Beverage Corporation. How did the sectors do today? Well, let's refresh this for a moment. You'll see that communication services was the only one that was up 0.38%. That's basically what Google falls under. And then real estate 2.78 down today. Healthcare was down 2.05%. Consumer cyclical down 1.82. Huge drop today in the markets. Okay, why did Google go up though? And there's a little article here. Google parent Alphabet's stock is rising amid growing optimism about its AI search. Basically, the shares of Google parent Alphabet rose a day after the Google I/O conference keynote and rollout of its AI mode offering in the U.S. JP Morgan analysts said they came away from the event more confident in Google's ability to navigate a transition to AI search. And Google also unveiled $249.99 per month AI subscription service that Bank of America expects to be competitive with OpenAI's and ChatGPT Pro. So that's very interesting there. The other stuff that we're going to talk about today, in addition to that post in a few moments here, we are going to go into the indices. We're going to take a look at the ETFs, all right, technical analysis using the Ichimoku indicator, and some of the stocks that they talked about on the show, on the halftime report, as well as, of course, the Mag 7. stocks, including Tesla. We'll look at that chart, okay? And then some of the strongest sectors and one of our members' requests. So let's first talk about the response that I got, basically, right, from Grok 3. This is not my information. This is from Grok 3. So don't kill the messenger, okay? Elon Musk, Tesla's CEO, has a well-documented history of making ambitious, often overly optimistic promises about Tesla's future achievements during interviews, earnings calls, and public statements. Right? Critics include investors and analysts have pointed to his pathological optimism as a pattern of over-embellishing Tesla's capabilities and timelines, particularly around innovations like autonomous driving, affordable electric vehicles, and production goals. While Musk's vision has driven Tesla's success as a leading EV manufacturer, many of his bold predictions have either been significantly delayed or remained unfulfilled, leading to scrutiny over their feasibility and his credibility. Now, the interesting thing was that his AI actually went into specific instances of the unfulfilled promises, like the full self-driving FSD technology, where the promise had repeatedly claimed since 2015 that Tesla full self-driving software would achieve full autonomy within a year or by the next year. And for example, in 2016, he predicted a fully autonomous cross-country trip by 2017. In 2020, I actually remember that. I thought that was really, I was like pretty excited about that concept. The idea of being able to go cross-country using the basically at the time those supercharge stations that they had, that there were going to be a lot more of those supercharging stations, and he claimed over 1 million robo-taxis would be on the road by the end of the year. That was back then. In 2025, he predicted millions of Teslas operating autonomously by the second half of 2026. What was the outcome, though? As of 2025, FSD remains a supervised system, and that was the thing that Bryn Talkington was corrected on, right? It's not fully autonomous, right? A 2020 statement to the California DMV revealed Tesla did not expect significant enhancements to enable full autonomy soon, contradicting Musk's public claims. Critics like investor Ross Gerber have called these promises delusional, citing Musk's unrealistic comparisons of FSD to human capabilities, example claiming Tesla's cameras are like human eyes. I haven't heard him say that, but I wouldn't be surprised. Then we've got the Cybercab robo-taxis, and it talks about the promise there. Musk predicted operational robo-taxis by 2020, later rebranded as Cybercab, with a planned production start in 2026. What's the outcome? Well, the Cybercab project has faced repeated delays due to supply chain issues and U.S. tariffs on Chinese components up to 145% in 2025. As of 2025, no operational robotaxis exist, and production timelines remain uncertain. You can look at these individually if you guys like the affordable Tesla EV 25,000 model, the promise, and the outcome. Cybertruck production, the promise and outcome there. I mean, this one especially is kind of interesting because the promise introduced in 2019, Cybertruck was slated for production by late 2021. Production began in 2023, 2 years behind schedule, with deliveries still scaling up slowly. The delay was attributed to manufacturing challenges and supply chain bottlenecks. The Cybertruck has also faced multiple recalls, with nearly 46,000 units recalled by 2025. And then you've got the next generation Roadster, promise and outcome there. The Gigafactory net zero emissions, where he said basically his promise in 2016, Musk claimed Tesla's Nevada Gigafactory would be a net zero emissions facility powered by 100% renewable energy from solar panels. What's the outcome? As of 2022, the Gigafactory had only 8 megawatts of solar power installed. I don't know where it's at right now. Far short of the 300 megawatts needed, making the net zero goal unattainable. Then you've got your production targets. He's talked about that many times, right, and has always come short the majority of the time. And then what was interesting was it also gave a critical perspective, right? So what it says here is Musk's over-embellishments have been criticized as manipulative, potentially to boost stock prices, secure investments, or collect customer deposits. For instance, in 2019, Tesla raised $3 billion in stock sales shortly after Musk's robotaxi promise, despite no clear path to delivery. Critics like journalist Bethany McLean argued Musk's grandiose statements may be knowingly exaggerated or lack intent for follow-through, raising ethical concerns. Tesla's loyal fan base often defends these delays as part of Musk's ambitious vision, but skeptics see them as misleading. And then finally, the conclusion here was basically that Musk's tendency to overpromise during interviews and public statements is evident in his optimistic timelines and exaggerated claims about Tesla's technological and production capabilities. While Tesla has achieved significant milestones, the repeated delays and unfulfilled promises spanning FSD, Cybercab, affordable EV, Cybertruck, Roadster, and Gigafactory emissions highlight a pattern of over-embellishment that has drawn criticism from investors, analysts, and regulators. If you guys want to see this post, just on my homepage, click on, you'll find these 5 tabs here. Click on posts and you'll find it right there. Okay? So let's take a look, guys. Let's take a look at, actually we're going to look at the stocks now. Yeah. Why don't we start off with Tesla, since we're talking about Tesla, all right? Brent Talkington believes that we should be buying the dips in Tesla. And look, I have purchased the stock in the past. I've actually been quite profitable trading Tesla in the past, but that was prior to the whole Doge situation, where he came into office and started, basically hacking into our systems and taking a lot of people's their health information as well as social security numbers. If you guys aren't familiar with that, you should Google all about that. But basically, so the last time I owned Tesla was actually back here. I had purchased it on December 5th, and then I closed out on December 17th. I closed the position on Tuesday. There was a hanging man candlestick pattern and it was quite distance from the Tenkan-sen. I had a 34.4% profit. I shared that trade with my members. I also had traded this back on November 11th. Let's see here. I closed the position on November 11th. I had entered it on November 6th, closed out of it just a few days later, 5 trading days later, for 23.1% profit. Again, these were all based on my buy signals from Ichimoku. Will I be doing that anytime soon? The answer is no. And that's because now I just don't feel as comfortable about purchasing the stock in a company that has essentially been boycotted by many countries. Okay, we're talking about the majority of Europe is not buying Tesla. The Chinese aren't going to buy Tesla vehicles when they have their own electric cars that are actually better in many, many ways. Who's going to buy the stock? Who's going to buy these vehicles? Is the question. They're running short on a customer base. You can't really, especially with the tariffs and everything else that's going on. I just don't see it. I don't see it, right? Yes, they're going to be coming out with, and I'm not saying that all of these things that he's saying that are going to happen aren't going to happen, but it could happen way, way down the line, which is most likely as far as the robots and everything else. And don't forget, there are competitors on the robots, like General Dynamics is way more ahead at this point than they are. So we'll see what happens. But look at the technicals. Let's look at the technicals. On the weekly chart right now, like I said before, yesterday, we talked about Tesla. I said it was coming close to this red line. What is that red line? It's part of the Ichimoku indicator. It's the 26 period moving average. It takes the midpoint, the last 26 candles. In this case, it's 26 weeks. All right, and it plots it. The reason why it's flat, like you see right there, is because it's always taking the midpoint of each. That takes the it takes the low of the candle and the high, and then it takes that midpoint, and then calculates the last 26 points, the last 26 midpoints of each candle, and then it plots it. That's why it can flatten out. And as I've mentioned before, if this moving average flattens out, it actually becomes a much stronger level of resistance when price is under it. In fact, last week it stalled right at the bottom there. This week it penetrated it briefly, okay, and then dropped. Now let's look at the daily time frame. And by the way, if you're not familiar with this specific little candle here, that's called the gravestone doji. It's when you have a little wick on the top and a kind of flat body at the bottom. All right, I'll show you what that looks like here on my candlestick pattern sheet. There it is. So it's a bearish single candle pattern. After a move up, if you see something like this, long wick and a flat body, okay? Or a shooting star. There's another variable, right? Or a bearish spinning top like that, or a hanging man at the top like that. These are all very bearish single candle patterns. And that's what we have here, don't we? So this is after a move up. We're experiencing that, and we're at a level of resistance, the Kijinsen. So I think there's a higher probability of a pullback here. Now that's the weekly. Here's the daily. You can see that it is stalling and is kind of in this little range still. All right. So if it continues to lose its this support level here and gets under the Tengen-sen and back into the cloud, I think there's a good probability that Tesla is going to drop from there. We'll see if I'm correct about that. Right now, it's still holding. Okay, it is still holding above this level. So if you happen to be holding this position, you still have this level of support. Okay, you've got the Tengen-sen, you've got the top of the cloud, and the 200-day and the 26 period is right there below on the daily time frame. But again, on the weekly, like I said before, the faster moving average is under the slower one. That's bearish. And yeah, let's look at the 2-hour. Check out the 2-hour time frame. So we've had this nice little run, right? Once it broke above the Ichimoku cloud right here, it's actually made a 29.85% move up. And so now what's happening? It closed for the first time since back here. It looks like the last time it was under the Kijinsen was probably like on this candle back in May 7th. Okay. Here we are, May 21st. There's a good chance that it could pull back further down to the cloud now on the 2-hour time frame. So, all right. Let's get into some of the other things now. We're going to look at the indices, and then I'll come back to these the Mag 7 stocks, okay? So, Dow Jones, DIA ETF. Here it is on the daily chart. Today down 1.93%. We had that reversal candle yesterday, indecision candle, whatever you want to call it. After a move up, it tends to be a potential drop if price gets under the low of that candle. If it breaks above the high, then you can cancel it out. It's no longer a relevant candle. But right now, we're seeing weakness in the Dow. It closed under the 200-day, that dotted yellow line. It also closed under the Tengen-sen today. All right? So, not looking good. How about FEZ? That's the Eurostoxx 50 ETF. It was down the least. Now, FEZ has been performing much better. That's the European stock ETF that you see right here. Much stronger than the Dow, the Russell, the Qs, and the S&P 500 in these this last week or so. A couple weeks or so, or more. The technicals look very strong still on the weekly chart, as you can see right there, and on the daily. So I like FEZ still. Yes, we got a down day, 0.40%, but it's still holding up above Tengen-sen. Russell 2000, on the other hand, gap down. And as you can see here, it closed under the 9 period. So there's a 9 period. It takes the midpoint of each candle, right? Like I said earlier, instead of 26 periods, it takes the last 9, the green line. And it still has some support right here at the cloud. So we may get a bounce on the cloud tomorrow, but there's no promises, right? So if there's a continuation sell-off, I don't know what to tell you. Right now, it's not looking good here in the directional movement index because the green line looks like it's about to cross over the red line on the Russell. And the volume was higher today than it was yesterday. You can see that volume bar was negative. So, yeah, it's not looking that promising for the Russell. The Qs. QQQ ETF also dropped down 1.39% higher, more volume as it's dropping. But it still has support at the Tengen-sen and 200-day moving average, and it's not looking as bearish as the Russell. S&P 500, same thing. So higher volume, pull back a little bit. It might find a little bit of support at these levels. We'll see tomorrow. The VIX actually spiked a little, 15.42% today. You can see it actually broke above the 200-day moving average after this little, you can see that little consolidation area where it was getting stuck right under that 200. And so now there's a little bit more fear in the markets, and you can see that it basically closed above that little that level there. Okay, so we might see a continuation to the upside. That's not good for the market when the VIX is increasing. That represents volatility, and so yeah, there's more of a potential of a decline tomorrow as well as a result of that. What about the stocks that they talk in ETF here? MTUM was talked about on the show, on the halftime report. Joe Terranova talked about this when it was down 1.82% today. It's losing a little bit of its steam. Remember what I said in yesterday's video? If you watched it, basically I said that you'll see the ADX moving up, but when you notice that a little sharp decline that you see right there, that tells us that the momentum is coming out. All right, so there's a higher probability of a decline here tomorrow. We'll see if I'm correct in that. But it does have support, right? So like again, as long as it holds above that green line, the Tengen-sen, I think it still has some potential to continue moving up if we get some positive news, obviously. You got Bank of New York Mellon Corporation also losing a little bit of that ADX momentum today. It was down 1.33% on higher volume than the prior day. And so it's still in an uptrend overall on the daily. What about the weekly, though? Yeah, it looks okay on the weekly. Seems to be stalling. I had a position in this for a short period of time. But yeah, it seems to be stalling right at that prior high, guys. So I'd be watching this level. The high there is 90.34. Let me just put that in there so you can see what I'm talking about. So it's stalling right there. There's a good chance that it could, if it does start to pull down, that's going to be creating a double top pattern. If you're unfamiliar with that, it looks a little bit like, where is it? Here. Double top. Let's zoom in on that one. So you'll notice here that as price moves up, it reaches a certain level, right? Doesn't matter. Let's say that's a $10 level right there. It drops down. Maybe it drops down to $5. Okay, it comes back to that $10 level. Comes back to that $5 level, but then drops under it. So now that is a higher likelihood that it's going to continue to the downside. The opposite of the bearish double top is the double bottom, which is right over here. This is the bullish variant. So after a decline, price comes down to this level. Let's hypothetically say $5, comes up to 10, comes back down to the $5 level, breaks through the 10 level, and then you can see a continuation to the upside. So that's an interesting thing. This little pattern cheat sheet you can find on my Twitter page. All the links that I have can be found right here, guys. Okay, once you're on my Blue Cloud Trading YouTube channel, see where it says 9 more links? Click that and scroll down. A whole bunch of links right there. There's the Twitter page. If you like the software that I'm using, TC2000, you can get a $25 coupon by clicking this link and just following the instructions. I've got a Patreon channel. More stuff down below. Okay, if you're a landlord and you're looking for some free property management software, I use this stuff. It's really great. Okay, let's go back. So we're talking about BK. So like I said, if this thing starts to pull down, it's a problem. If it breaks through the 90.34, then expect a continuation to the upside, obviously. But I would not be entering a long position. That's what the technicals help us to do, is identify where we are most likely to find resistance, and we're finding it right there. It stalled at that 90.34 level yesterday on Tuesday, and guess what? It's staying under that level again today. Tomorrow is another day. If it can break through, then okay, then you got some more optimism, and there's a higher probability to the upside, basically. What about WCN? This was Karen Firestone, the older lady there on the show. She owns the stock, and this one on the weekly chart actually looks pretty good. I'm not going to lie. Waste Connections, Inc. It does make sense to want to invest in stocks that are not going to be as impacted by tariffs, and this is a company that would not be, basically. It has no affiliation with other countries, really, if you think about it. So, yeah, it was down 0.05. That's a really small drop today, but on the technicals on the weekly look bullish. What are we looking for with the Ichimoku indicator? We want price to be above the Tengen-sen, the green line, or conversion line they call that, or the baseline, Kijun-sen, baseline, the red line. We want price to be above the cloud. And we want this white line that you see here, which is the closing price. Okay, we want that to be above. It projects 26 periods into the past right there. That candle's price right there basically projects 26 periods into the past. If that white line is above the candle 26 periods ago, like this one right here. Okay, that's bullish. If it's under, it's bearish. Here's some, if I go back in time, actually this stock has done quite well. Let's look at this on the daily chart. So here's a situation here where you can see that the Chiku span, the lagging line there, was under the candles. That was bearish. Right now on the daily chart, what does it look like? It is currently above the cloud on the daily. The future cloud looks slightly bearish. There's a little crossover taking place there. The good news is that this stock did find support not just once, but 3 times on the 200-day. So once it broke through that 200-day moving average, the yellow dotted line right there, found support right there, found support again a second time there, found support a third time, and bounced. Kept on bouncing off that 200-day. So right now it's breaking up. It broke through the Ichimoku cloud. We don't have all of the elements here giving us a buy signal, but it's starting to show some strength. I think that it would make sense to wait a little bit, maybe until it gets above the high there, because then you'll have confirmation that this thing has potential to expand to the upside. Here's a 2-hour. Maybe you want to, if you're looking for to get into this a little quicker, for example, you could switch it over to a 2-hour time frame. And what you'll notice here is that things are, looking pretty bullish on the 2-hour, because price broke through here on Tuesday at 2 p.m. on this little candle. Price was above Tenkan-sen, Kijun-sen, above the 200. Chiku span here was above the price, and we have a bullish cloud. So you can trade this on any time frame that you choose to, but just keep in mind that once you pick a time frame, you want to stick to that specific time frame, right? Now I like to look at multiple time frames for confirmation. So I'm looking typically, the stocks that I personally add to my portfolio, always price has to be above the Tenkan-sen, Kijun-sen, above the cloud. Chiku span has to be positive on the weekly chart, both on the weekly and daily when I enter the position. Now, once I've entered that position, I'm just trying to manage that trade the best I possibly can. Okay, utilizing the daily and shorter time frames for a more optimal exit when it's the right time to get out. Okay, sometimes you might have to take a small loss. Other times you can let it run for a while and just look for that opportunity to get out to make a nice profit. Basically, you want to keep your losses low and small, and just let the winners run, basically. And to become a member so that you can access the portfolio that I have, guys, basically go to this again, to that. You can click this right here, right on my homepage. Click the join button. Okay. And once you do, this thing will pop up here, this little box, and there are 3 levels that you can choose from. You've got Blue Cloud Supporter, which is $4.99 a month. Whoops, sorry about that. We've got the Blue Cloud Trader. Okay, now if you click on that, it will pop up a different amount here. And then also, that's when you get access to those exclusive member-only videos that I do once a week on the weekends. And you can request stocks to be analyzed on the show. And then Blue Cloud Legend level membership, you get those exclusive member-only videos. You can request up to 3 stocks, ETFs to be analyzed each week. And then day trading videos that I've recorded, you'll have access to those, which you won't have access under Blue Cloud Trader. You'll also have access to the daily trade updates, which I post not under the community tab, but under, there's going to be a new thing that pops up here once you become a member. I'm going to show you what it looks like right here, the membership tab. So once you click on that, you'll be able to see the posts that I place every day on my trades. Okay, let's look at the Mag 7. So Microsoft, still, okay, interesting. Ooh, that's the 2-hour we're looking at. Let's look at the daily. Okay, and let me get rid of some of these lines. There's a lot of lines here. Just want to show you guys with a clear, just the Ichimoku and the 200. We are at a level of resistance. You can see that it got back under. Maybe I should show you those links, that trend line. That level there, 456.16. We got underneath it. We broke above it briefly for 2 days, and then it came back under. So it's down 1.22% today. That's not a good sign, but it is technically still sound compared to the other stocks. Microsoft looks the strongest to me still, because the weekly chart shows the Tenkan-sen is at the same level as the Kijun-sen. All right, so that's one of the things I'm looking for. Nvidia, on the other hand, you'll see that the Tenkan-sen is under Kijun-sen. It's more bearish, in my opinion. It has had a nice little run up here on the weekly. On the daily time frame, seems to be stalling now since Wednesday, May 14th, since last week. It's kind of caught up in this little consolidation stage here. Now, it could certainly find some support there and then take off. But let's look at the 2 hour. Here's the 2 hour time frame. So you can see that that consolidation today with that drop of 1.92%. Let's take a look and see where it's at. So yeah, it's still holding in there. Okay, so you can see that the price closed inside the box, and that's important, that it can stay in that box. So we'll wait and see. Basically, would I be adding a position here based on that 2 hour time frame? No, I'd want to wait for a breakout. But that's my strategy. I'm more of a breakout trader than anything else. So I'm not, and I'm also looking for. I do like to buy dips, but it has to like actually be above the Tenkan-sen and Kijun-sen, and it's not there yet. All right, let's look at the daily time frame, guys. Google. So this one was up the most today, right? 2.79% out of the bunch. We just talked about why it's up, but it did stall at that 200-day moving average. All right. So even though price, it opened up at that level, closed there, it did move all the way up there and then gave up a bunch of that today. Here's a 2 hour. Okay, so it just pulled back a little bit towards the last, since 2 p.m. It dropped a little bit. But it's holding up on the 2 hour above the Tenkan-sen Kijun-sen, so I like this. Google's looking good on the 2 hour. On the daily, it still needs to break through that cloud zone. So that's something I'd be watching. And on the weekly chart, we still have a Tenkan-sen under Kijun-sen, so it's still bearish. We already talked about Tesla. Here's Amazon on the weekly, not looking that great here, down 1.45%, crossed under the Kijun-sen again. Here's a daily chart inside the cloud, in between the Tenkan-sen, the 9 period, and the 200-day, so it's kind of stuck in there. And then so I wouldn't be doing anything with Amazon. Apple is also inside the Ichimoku cloud on the daily time frame, so that's not a good place to be. On the weekly chart, it's also pretty bearish. All right. And what about Meta? Meta, a little bit more bullish on the weekly chart, but it's still, Tenkan-sen is under Kijun-sen. On the daily chart, we are above the Ichimoku cloud. Price is stalling right there at the Tenkan-sen. That's a good sign. Wouldn't be surprised to see it pop up tomorrow. Here's the 2 hour. Okay, so that's what I'd be watching to see if it can make, because right now it's just on the 2 hour time frame. You can see it stuck again in a range. This is the low that it needs to stay above right here. And so as long as it doesn't break that low, I think it's got some potential. If it breaks above, that will be, I could see an expansion. Okay, and then for the sectors, we're just going to talk about the strongest ones that I have highlighted right here. GDX up 1.29%. That's the gold miners ETF. That's the 2 hour time frame. Here's a daily. It broke through the channel. Guys, remember what I said yesterday? I said this yesterday. I said once we break through that channel, I think that GDX is going to take off. When the market is dropping, guess what strengthens? Gold. Gold miners, GDX will go up. The GLD was up 0.74%. We're going to show you that in a second. So I like what I'm seeing here with GDX. How about XLI? Industrials, this dropped 1.69%. On the daily chart, it's still above the moving averages. On the weekly chart, seems kind of stalling, like right at that prior high of 144.51. So, here's a 2 hour. It's dropping under the Kijun-sen. It could certainly pull back. And look at that volume increasing to the downside. Remember, I've also talked about how important it is to look at volume. And how is it reacting? Is it moving up on a decline? That's not good. Okay, that's telling us that, yeah, there's more and more people. There's more and more trades taking place here. That's what that volume signifies. 4 million trades took place today. Yesterday it was about, what was that? About 2.7 million or so. The day before that, 2.2. The day before that, on Wednesday last week, it was like, oh, this is a 2 hour time frame. Sorry. I thought we were on a daily time frame. Sorry about that. Yeah, on the 2 hour time frame, you can see here that throughout the day, since yesterday, the volume has steadily been increasing, all right, on the industrials. This is the daily chart. It's still, you know, the overall picture is still good, but it is declining. Okay. Bitcoin is at 108,180 is the price. It's coming close to a level of resistance though. So let's throw that resistance level in. I'm going to show you guys how to do it. If you're using TC2000, very easy to do. You'll see the little, this right here pop up. If you click on the that little thing right there, it'll pop up all these different icons. And there it is. If you highlight it, horizontal line, click on that, and then just look for the prior high right there. Real easy to find. Okay. The high there was, well, I'm not going to get the exact amount, 109,286.50. There we go. And that's, we're going to use the weekly color. I like to use weekly levels if it's really far back, like it is right there. So that's the area that it actually broke through that level today, and then it retreated. So again, we need to get above 109,286.50. This could pull back now. It's possible. But if it breaks through and closes one more day above that level, expect a continuation to the upside for Bitcoin. And that's, here's the weekly chart. So that's, you can see right there how it stalled twice. Here, it happened back here on Friday, December 20th, happened again January 24th, and we're right back at that same level. So that's why it's important to watch these levels. Why is that? Because guess what? Investors are watching these levels. Technical analysts are watching these levels, and they're looking to see, can we break through prior highs? That's really important. And we have not done that yet. We haven't closed above it. We broke through it. We didn't close above it. XLC is on the weekly chart. And on the weekly chart, it looks, you know, like it's moving up right now. Tenkan-sen is still under Kijun-sen. We do have a bullish cloud. Most of the elements are good, but we do have a lower low here. What about on the daily? On the daily, we broke through this high here, so it's still looking relatively strong. If we look at this prior high right there, which was 121. Oops. Okay. So as long as we hold above 121, I think we will be good. I'll just highlight this little area. That's the area that I'm using as a high. Okay. Next, IBIT ETF. Well, of course, it's going to act the same way as the actual Bitcoin, right? Versus the US dollar, Bitcoin USD. So it's stalling. It stalled. It looks like it broke above slightly by a few pennies above that prior high back on December 17th. And it happened on high volume. But that upper wick represents selling that took place at the end of the day. That little wick that you see right there. Let me show you what I mean. 5-minute chart is going to show us that. So it reached this high, and at around 12:50 p.m. today, okay, because we are on the 21st, we can see the move up throughout the day. It was around this time, at around at around 1 p.m. it crossed under the Tenkan-sen, and then it dropped about almost 3%, and then it basically moved back up. So right now it was up 1.44%. On the 5-minute, it still looks pretty bullish. On the daily chart, though, I'd be very cautious and wait for another day. I'd like to see a second day, maybe tomorrow, price closing above the 61.79 level. Okay, utilities is looking pretty good here overall, right? Because it's still above the moving averages, above the cloud on the daily chart, but it did drop 1.82%. So it's going to probably find some support right there at the Tenkan-sen. How about the weekly chart? Okay, so now this one also is stalling at that 83.41. So that's what we're dealing with now. Price has reached prior levels, and we need to see what happens. Really, it's going to take a little time. GLD gold, on the other hand, is showing bullishness once again. Here's the weekly chart. So it pulled back to the Tenkan-sen. Now it's bouncing off of it on the weekly. Here's the daily chart. Crossed back above the moving averages after this negative crossover. So this could be just a short-lived crossover. I think that's going to be the case. I think it's more than likely to pop up. I said that this was looking more and more like a short-lived little, bullish flag, basically, is what this is called. I mentioned that yesterday. So if we look at, hold on, right here. See how there's a little decline right there and a little decline right there? That's called a bullish flag, basically. And again, that's one of the patterns that you'll find here in the pattern cheat sheet. It's when you see a short-lived little decline, very short-lived and very small decline, but it will experience a lower high from the prior high, a lower low. Okay, but if it can break through that, then that's very bullish. It happened in the GDX. I just showed you how that happened in the GDX. It still needs to happen here for gold. And so let me just go ahead and draw that trend line and the other one for the lows here. Actually, what I'll do is I'll right click and create a parallel. By the way, guys, notice how some of the options here, if TC2000, you can also buy off the trend line. How cool is that? Buy stop at trend line or sell limit at trend line. So they also have a brokerage service, and they're tied to Interactive Brokers. This is really cool. Anyway, so I'm going to create a parallel line, and I'm going to throw it right there. And so there we have it. So if we see price break through that trend line, I think we're going to see a much bigger move up for gold. So watch for that. And then finally, one more stock, CLS. One of our members requested this one. Let's look at this on the weekly chart. Currently, price has been moving up steadily. In fact, it was up 1.22% today. We have a bullish cloud right now, but the Tenkan-sen is under the Kijun-sen. The faster moving average is under the slower one. That's not good. It's not particularly important if you're trading a shorter time frame like the daily, though, which is showing bullishness. So one thing that I would recommend, if you happen to have a position in Celestica right now, what I would say is, okay, manage this on this time frame, on the daily time frame and the 2 hour. So right now it's building a nice little base right there. Price is above the Tenkan-sen and the Kijun-sen. You get the Chikou span above the candles down below. And look at this 2 hour time frame. It's still holding up above the moving averages in the 2 hour. If it starts to break down, maybe take some profits, All right, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Appreciate all of you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and consider sharing this video with someone that you think might like it so we can get the word out. And thanks for watching.